In the waning years of the political war, the fandom in the broader world would face an unforeseen cataclysm. The pandemic spread worldwide at the turn of the decade, impacting both everyday life and the fandom itself. Although furries are predominantly online these days, conventions worldwide remained an integral part of our culture. That was until lockdowns and the safety of people everywhere became a risk. This video is about a small team of friends who looked at the growing virtual reality furry scene and decided to take a 30-year-old tradition virtual. Hello furs from the web, my name is Scar, and this is the story of the Furality online experience. Stay tuned. "2020 was the start of a new decade, and for many was an exciting year to look forward to. This was of course until March, when the pandemic hit its stride. Overnight, the world became fixated on this new disease, dramatically altering the lives of people going forward. Schools began teaching remotely, a lot of people unfortunately lost their jobs, and lockdowns changed just about every aspect of daily life. This included those in the furry community, and although many experienced the fandom online, a large amount of the community also attends various in-person events. Fur meets and furry conventions alike began to alter their plans, forced to adapt to the situation. Starting with Vernal Equinox scheduled for March 20th and 22nd, virtually every other con after was either cancelled or postponed to a later date. Anthrocon was cancelled, Eurofurence was cancelled, and many others followed suit or postponed their plans, unsure of when the pandemic would come to an end. A few cons, in an attempt to salvage their presence, transitioned their event into a virtual format. Most of these were in the form of live streams, offering a window into the exciting worlds conventions tend to foster, albeit a stripped-down experience. The world as a whole and the furry fandom were quickly forced to adapt to the changing social rules. This unfortunately took a massive toll on community events. With many people locked indoors though, an upcoming medium was about to see a large surge in user base. Not only one that would revolutionize online meetups, but would forever alter the landscape of many conventions going forward. The Oculus DK1 may have been released in 2013, but it would be several years before virtual reality took off into a large-scale audience. VRChat as a platform was originally released a year later, in a similar niche in a smaller scale state. Some people credit its large growth in the later 2010s to online content creators. Most famously, Greg Zilla accidentally created a viral sensation with his "Do you know the way" phrase as they deformed Knuckles and Sonic the Hedgehog. Furries themselves have been involved in customizable virtual spaces since their earliest days on the internet. During the furry renaissance in the 90s, many became involved in Furry Muck, a text-based roleplay environment that put a social spin on traditional MUDs RPG fans took part in. When the World Wide Web rose to prominence in the following decade, Second Life gave furries a more visual platform to engage with one another. Translating the same level of freedom as the old text-based mucks, Second Life allowed players to create their own characters and alter plots of the world to their heart's content. In another revolutionary shift, VRChat brought a similar formula to a more immersive medium. Creators could now build completely unique world spaces and avatars with the complete freedom offered by a proper game engine. It still had many limitations, but over the years, improvements and innovation would mean those horizons only continued to broaden. Furry had a small presence in the emerging platform dating back quite a ways, but in the wake of the 2020 pandemic, a small group of friends thought it was the perfect time to experiment with a new concept. A furry named Odo had an idea to bring the conventions to the world of virtual reality. Together with Dalton and a handful of their friends, decided to build an event from the ground up in VRChat. Virtual cons had existed in the past, with a few all the way back to Second Life during the late 2010s, and the Japanese meeting of the furries running a lounge alongside their main event in January of 2020. The difference is that the Japan events were run as an alternative to the main FurCon, and not an entire convention on its own. Building upon the tradition of conventions having dedicated themes, the small Furality team created a pair of worlds embracing a retro cyberpunk theme, slightly differentiated into event and dance venues. This approach designated a separate world for different rules of the convention and laid down a foundation for future cons that would follow. Given the limitation on player instances, the convention, if it attracted more than even just a few dozen attendees, would require multiple instances at once. Dalton worked diligently to create an online portal that could coordinate players to different instances and manage the backend. Although imperfect, the system worked as intended and functioned as a proof of concept going forward. The first Furality, simply titled Furality 2020, was an unbridled success. Statistically, it totaled 2,692 attendees and raised $8,646.93 for charity. The portal system proved invaluable based on the turnout, being pushed to its limits and even having performance issues because of the large player count. What had intended to be a smaller event to test the concept of a VR chat furry convention, calling back to the original Conference Zero in some ways, blew expectations out of the water. Some of this success can be attributed to the convention's compatibility with standalone VR headsets such as the Oculus Quest, but also the ability to play VR chat in desktop mode. Without any in-person conventions to go to, the pandemic ensured enough people logged on to make Furality rival the upper echelon of furry conventions. With their proof of concept more than successful, Dalton and crew bunkered down to begin work on their first successor event, one that would break the annual tradition of most conventions and push the convention into a twice-a-year cycle. One of the things Furality set out to do after their first outing was to more officially establish themselves. The design of f.y.n.n, the Furality Yottabyte Neural Network, aka Furality's mascot, was greatly expanded. He is described as an AI fox who has maintained a presence across the conventions. Dalton and crew took a page out of many in-person furry conventions as well. Furality was incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit organization out of Florida. Furality Inc. became an organization dedicated to furthering anthropomorphic art and the furry fandom within the realm of virtual reality. Although their mission statement is a little long-winded to read off in this video, they ultimately achieved that goal by providing a forum for their attendees to gather, experience, share, and celebrate anthropomorphic art. Furality Inc. would now run the conventions titled the Furality Online Experiences. They also organized their team more officially, assigning specific roles such as DevOps, events, video production, and more. Although their new status would allow them for specific tax exemptions, other financial obligations such as paying artists who helped design the worlds and artwork, large IT costs of supporting the convention, and becoming the first furry convention to event partner with VRChat demanded they reevaluate their stance on pricing attendance. Details are scarce on the matter, but it is known that Furality shares a special partnership with VRChat, allowing them to best integrate their online portal system. Part of this deal includes licensing fees whenever these large-scale events are held, though, likely to offset the increased traffic and strain on a normally free platform's resources. This, alongside their own IT costs, required them to begin charging an attendance fee for the con. For their follow-up event, the price ranged from $10 to $100, with each tier packing more bonuses than the previous. This, of course, is pretty standard across most in-person conventions, but it did disappoint some previous attendees. In an effort to make Furality as inclusive as possible, most of the tiers include an extra voucher for a friend to come see the convention, and additional vouchers are available for purchase. For those who are still unable to attend, they offer an avenue where free vouchers can be obtained through their financial hardship application. Later that year at Eurofurence Online, a pandemic-friendly adaptation of the original convention, Dalton hinted at another event possibly occurring within the same year. This was later confirmed on August 30th, sending the theme back to the turn of the millennium. Furality 2000 was not designed to celebrate what the year truly was, though, but to reimagine the hype and excitement that led up to it. The worlds were expanded with a higher production value, and introduced both a main lobby and a trio of color-coordinated dealer's dens. The event world was evolved into a dedicated panel room, and the dance variation became Club f.y.n.n, a staple for cons going forward. With an improved online portal system by the head of DevOps AlloFox, an expanded website with much more information, a new Discord server to better coordinate the community, and a turnout of over 3,100 attendees, Furality Inc. was only further solidifying its place in the community. With the success also came another $5,800 raised for the Save a Fox charity, allowing them to expand operations and save more foxes in the process. Year 1 established a lot for Furality, and ambitions only continued to rise. Months passed, and work behind the scenes progressed to develop something completely original. Whereas previous conventions were a bit more traditional when it came to their theming, their upcoming project would set a new bar for virtual cons everywhere. Announced in late January of 2021, Furality Luma promised attendees the chance to see the new World of Luma in all of its bioluminescent glory. Slated for the spring season, the dates were announced for early June that March. While the build-up hype was steady, it was a mere dip in the bucket compared to what would come. A trailer premiered, showcasing the hard work for all to see. The art style became iconic, with each of the 5 worlds masterfully immersing the players in the forests of the vibrant Lost World. Luma received a substantial amount of world building, presenting a rogue planet brought to life by magical crystals supporting its bioluminescent flora and breathtaking colors. One of these artists, HIYU, lent his musical talent to writing an original soundtrack for the convention. Although only a few minutes in length, this additional song really helped shape a bow around the World of Luma as a whole. Luma was also the first time a proprietary shader was publicly distributed, encouraging avatar owners to create emissive layers on their avatar that would dynamically change color with the surrounding world. A package of unique runes was also included, encouraging their owners to spruce up their designs and even blend further into the World of Luma. With over double the attendance and charity donations from the previous year, Luma was an unbridled success story. Furality only continued to grow, and a beloved world was created that many had fallen in love with. Riding the high of Furality Luma, Furality Inc. wished to continue the tradition of running 2 events in a single year. Their next big convention came the following November as Furality Legends. Continuing the formula set in place by Luma, they built a new world heavily inspired by a superhero comic book style known as Legend City. The attendance reached over 9,000, and many returning players were excited to see what the team could dream up following their iconic World of Luma. For many, Legends did provide that eye-opening experience to virtual cons, but for some returning players, the praise wasn't as universal. I had a brief conversation with a streamer named Mama Lucy about this, and it did start to give me a little more context on the matter.
For people who had been to Luma just before Legends, because they went all out on Luma kind of thing, Legends felt a little bit rushed. For people who had been to Luma, Legends was amazing, you know?
Yeah.
It's just people who had experienced the previous one felt it was a little bit lame. Legends was definitely great, especially as
they do.
For a handful of people, it's not that Legends was a bad convention or theme. It's just compared to the bright, colorful, vibrant worlds and the very original design of Luma, many saw the muted and more grounded city environment as a bit bland. The convention had a few returning level archetypes, but also included superhero and supervillain hideouts. A new iteration of the shader was created, as well as a new theme. The superhero versus supervillain idea was definitely novel, playing into both sides in a way a traditional convention really couldn't. Trading the colorful forests and vibrant skies, the change in scenery differentiated itself from the predecessor. Dressing up avatars also evolved from prior cons, adding a large number of unique props and costume pieces. The convention was ultimately a success, with a lot of positive feedback, but it wasn't the same universal praise that followed before. In my talks with Dalton, he shared his thoughts on why he thought some people had felt this way. Quote, "We know that Luma is special to many attendees, but we often hear so much of the same fondness when it comes to Furality Legends. I think the first Furality event someone attends has a way of making that theme feel very special to them. It's less of a balance of what the themes are, Luma versus something else, and it's a decision of the nostalgia versus what's new. Virtual reality is a one-of-a-kind medium, and even for myself, there is a special attachment to some of my early experiences on the platform. Although some may have felt let down by Legends, for many it was just as breathtaking as Luma. Although a few of these voices rose high above the crowd, the majority of attendees enjoyed the con through and through. At the end of Legends, a surprise announcement was made. It was something most of the staff didn't even know was coming, and left many of them in tears. In the following year, Furality would return to the wandering world. Luma was back in the spotlight, but this time attendees would be traveling to the deepest waters. The oceans of Luma were a concept originally passed around during the production of Furality Luma. With the amount of time and effort dedicated to building the world, ideas branched beyond just the forest attendees would come to know. Oceans, waterfalls, and other parts of the planet were tossed around during its development. Furality Aqua became the next big project, revisiting the World of Luma but focusing on a place where the style could stand out from the past. A teaser was released at the end of Furality Legends, building a hype train for the coming summer of 2022. 5 levels were created following the established template, including one for events, meetups, dancing, dealers, and a main lobby. Notable additions include high-quality cinematography, a full-on CGI look at the new lore piece Luma Flow, and a better organized dealer's den. The audio design also received an immaculate amount of attention, led and designed by Daryl. It was so good, in fact, it led to me and at least 2 other people making ambience captures of the different worlds. For real, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think a major reason these worlds felt so special to me personally is because of the god-tier ambient sounds each world contained. The online portal and many other aspects were also upgraded across the board. HIYU also returned with his composition skills, creating 2 new tracks for the convention. Furality Aqua became an enormous phenomenon, and the team's hard work paid off. The attendance count once again doubled with over 15,000 attendees and raised over $22,000 for Save a Fox. To put things in perspective, that is bigger than any other furry convention on record, with MFF bringing in 13,641 attendees in 2022. Although the charity number didn't break any records, it's still a huge step up from the previous events and likely a godsend for the Fox Sanctuary over in Minnesota. While Furality does not compare itself to other conventions, many are critical of those who would call Aqua the biggest furry convention ever, rightfully pointing out its more accessible nature both financially and geographically. However, attendees of Furality will tell you that the experiences shared at an online convention mirror that of any physical convention. Nonetheless, Furality has been cemented as one of the juggernauts of furry conventions, and the future has a lot of potential for this relatively new player in the fandom. Once again winning the hearts and minds of its attendees, Furality Aqua broke some hearts when the world shut down for good even after extending their lifespan another day. In case you weren't aware, at the end of each convention, the worlds are forever taken down. Finn's apartment is an exception, one that offers a chance to revisit small locations from both Luma and Legends. It once held worlds for 2020 and 2000 as well, but the majority of world spaces are lost for good, leaving many yearning for some part of Aqua to remain in the future. Thankfully, later that year a public version of the main lobby, featuring a major extension of its playable space, was released. This decision was made because Finn's apartment is at the limit of Quest compatibility, so this new format will likely continue into the future. Furality, for the first time since its creation, would only feature one convention in 2022. Another would be announced for June of 2023, but the theme was kept secret for the time being. Of course, a festival was also announced, once again expanding the World of Luma. Depending on when this video comes out, this event should be underway. But as we're caught up to the modern day, it's finally time to talk about the future of Furality, and where it may be headed. From what Dalton told me, it's a little deceptive with just how much attention the World of Luma has been given. Right about the time of this video's release, a 30-hour mini-event known as the Furality Luma Festival is being held in VR chat. Unlike the conventions, this festival will focus on live performers and include an avatar showcase. I don't know how many world spaces the festival will have, but it is primarily set in a region known as Luma Falls. This new location is set in the forests of Luma, originally showcased during the convention's 3rd outing. Even if his theory holds true about the first Xperience being the theme players get most attached to, Luma has now been represented as many times as Furality has not featured Luma. There has been a shared sentiment across the community after Aqua, myself included, that a decently sized amount of people would like to see Luma become a reoccurring theme in the future. As we've learned though, Aqua was already a concept before Luma became a public phenomenon. Similarly, the Falls of Luma were already a work in progress during Luma's development and were subject to the cutting room floor. Quote, "I wouldn't characterize us as picking a favorite theme. We love them all, and each has given us a chance to do something cool, even if it's like Furality Aqua where we continued a theme. It was still distinctly different from Furality Luma with its own aesthetic. We can only do so much each event, and our dreams and imagination reach much farther than the scope of our current project. Luma Falls was originally first started on over 21 months ago. It just wasn't something we ended up using for Furality Luma. While it's possible that the widespread love of Luma has contributed to the continuation of its theme, none of the ideas so far were created in response to that love. Luma has been an iconic part to the Furality Online experience, but its continuation in the future is a little uncertain. Becoming locked into one idea, no matter how beloved, does put a damper on the team's creativity. I'd expect the team to have more ideas and wish to explore them with their newfound talent and ambition. Given the recent presence of both this festival and Aqua, I'm expecting the next convention's theme, which will be announced at the end of the festival, will not be part of the Wandering World. Furality has also become a success story for virtual cons and the fandom as a whole. I expect to see a continued trend of growth in the future, but ultimately that's impossible to predict. All I can say is make the most out of every moment you have during the con like you do any other, because you will certainly miss it when it's gone. While the world was in chaos, and many rushed to recreate the in-person con experience in virtual reality, Furality entered this brave new world, embraced the unique aspect VR offered. While other cons focused on live streams or rebuilding the familiar realistic hotel lobbies, Dalton and his growing team across multiple divisions continued to create beautiful worlds and immersive experiences that only VR can offer. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the small but amazing engineering behind the immersion sprays as well. VR already emulates visuals, sounds, and for those with phantom touch, feeling. Why not enhance the experience by including scent as well? Now all we need is Furality flavored food, and we will have all the bases covered. But until next time, guys, have fun out there. And a massive thanks to Dalton, Bilba Parkins, and especially Alofox for helping me with this script. Until next time, guys, I'll see you later.